neoliberalism is not just an idea. It's a crusher of souls. It's a destroyer of lives. And the neoliberal discourse, which is enormously successful, or has been, puts it out that neoliberalism is just about government getting out of the way so that the market can work its magic and we can reward people's ingenuity, entrepreneurialism, originality, freedom, in other words. But we know that neoliberalism isn't the government getting out of the way. It's not about deregulation. It's about different configuration of regulation. It's about a different set of rules being imposed. It's about government actually stepping in, being heavily interventionist into the lives of working class people on behalf of capital. It's not the government stepping out of the schoolyard to let the bullies rule the schoolyard. It's government actively arming the bullies with sticks and telling their intended victims to stand still. Which is why the union movement is particularly vilified and hated by the neoliberal state apparatus. Because instead of standing still, the union movement stands up against those who wield the sticks. I will put it to you that the only crime that the union movement is collectively guilty of is the crime of having and giving hope. The very least a Labor government can do is to decriminalise that hope. But there is so much more, as Jed has said, that a Labor government can do and we hope will do. We would love a Labor government to join us in being a vehicle for that collective hope, because the role of government is to achieve the collective dreams of the many rather than pandering to the demands of the wealthy few. How did we get to where we are now? I'm reminded of that phrase by the French poet Paul Valéry when he said, the future is not what it used to be. And in a sense, that could well characterise the kind of future imagined during that Hawke-Keating era. I think my gloss on it is that I think there was a genuine belief that the future would be so moderated by some of the reforms, particularly that Ben and Jen have mentioned, that neoliberalism would be tempered to a degree that would protect workers' rights, protect the rights of ordinary people, and ensure an access to those necessities of life. A place to live, a place to work for those who can work, adequacy of income for those who can't.
Sorry,
that's right. That's okay. Go.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for being.
Place to live, place to work, place to learn, place to heal. I think there was a degree of optimism that by putting in the kind of protections then, that the future imagined would be one where they would hold. But as Valéry says, the future is not what it used to be. And rather than holding, that indeed paved the way for neoliberalism unleashed, capitalism on steroids, which we saw particularly during the Howard era. I believe in many ways we are still living in the Howard era. Because I think, I'm not wishing to be unkind, but I don't believe that the previous Labor government undid that very well embedded apparatus that the Howard government has institutionally embedded. And again, I'm not making a judgment on intentionality, I'm just saying historically I think that's what's happened. I'm reminded of a couple of years ago, I was in Melbourne and I saw a young woman sitting on a corner just opposite Town Hall, and it was about 8:30 in the morning, and she was getting increasingly angry and aggressive towards the people going past. She was asking for some money, and people were giving her an ever wider berth as she was getting increasingly angry. So I went over and had a bit of a chat, and she explained to me that she'd been sitting here she said, I've been sitting here since 5 o'clock this morning. She said, I know I'm not asking for housing, I just want enough money to buy a fucking muffin and a cup of coffee for breakfast, and I'm being ignored, and people wonder why I'm angry. And we talked, and then she said something incredibly poignant. She said, almost apologetically, she said, I didn't choose this life, you know. I didn't choose this life, you know. And I thought, you have just summed up the entire edifice of lies that neoliberalism perpetrates against you, against all of us. That everything is a choice. That someone who is experiencing homelessness could only possibly have gotten there through bad choices. Someone experiencing unemployment, ditto. Someone in low-paid wages, a low-paid job. I mean, we had the former Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, making that absolutely deeply offensive comment to that aged care worker, you recall, when posed with the question about her wages, it just makes me so angry, when he said, well, she could easily increase her wages by going and getting a better job. How deeply offensive. But it is all predicated on this ideology of unbounded choice. As Emma put it so well, inequality is a choice. It's a political choice, not a personal one. And it's certainly not an economic inevitability. So the challenge is, as Labor holds this conference in preparation for what government will look like, the challenge is, what choice will the Labor government make? You choose your sides. When the Liberals are in power, they very clearly choose their side. They do not even give an ounce of attention to the legitimate demands of the working class. When Labor is in power, can we say the same? It's a very big question, and we have to pose it in all honesty. It's a critical question for us because it is only through a commitment to the needs of the working class that we will turn around this neoliberal trajectory. If we utterly reject it, I would put to you that it is time to say goodbye neoliberalism, which is the title of the paper that I just wrote for the CFMMEU. But in saying goodbye to neoliberalism, we have to say, what do we want to say hello to? That's the question we need to formulate. In my view, we need to say hello, democratic socialism.
Yay!